Welcome to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. Deep dives through the journey of youth sports, what parents experience, what coaches experience, and most importantly, what your kids experience. We'll also feature the latest information, tips, tools, and resources to help parents, coaches, and athletes navigate and improve the culture of youth sports. And now, the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, back to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. I am Travis Snyder, joined by my co-host, Seth Taylor. And we are looking forward to diving into episode number 8, The Resistance. Speaking of resistance, why is being consistent in sports so difficult?
The number one thing, right? Consistency. That's the biggest problem. Like, it's not that players can't get to a great spot. Many do, that very few maintain. Right. And you and I have talked about this a lot because that was the struggle in your life, right? Like you go up to this space and trying to stay there. And you've heard lots of professional athletes talk about maintaining, staying there is the hardest thing. And it's like that for anybody at any level. The last episode we talked about the flag planting phenomenon that has a lot to do with it is that, again, to get back to the foundations, the identity foundations when you were a child, okay? If you are asking the question, am I safe? Am I valuable? Am I safe? Am I valuable? And that question never gets fully answered properly, right? We exit those years and we learn that parts of us are safe if we perform well. Parts of us are safe if we give them what they need, right? As we carry that forward, consistency becomes incredibly difficult because with every success also presents within itself kind of a poison pill in a sense. Because every time you got good, not only did that reinforce the narrative, I am good, I am safe, I am loved, it presented itself with this, I call it the shadow. The shadow of that is what, and you're constantly being presented with a new opportunity to fail because you're constantly being elevated to the next level, right? So your ego kind of plants the flag, I'm good here, and then you go to the next level and boom, immediately this threat to that narrative, to that story, to that love gets presented, right? And so consistency is incredibly hard to maintain because every time someone gets successful, they tend to, the ego tends to rise with its narratives, and within it, all the parts of us that are still trying to get those needs met start to feel that. But again, the shadow of it is this new level now threatens something. So a player gets that contract. Okay, there was an NFL player this last year, Justin Herbert got a contract, the number one contract, richest contract in NFL history. Within that is presented a major problem. Now you have to earn this thing. Now you have to be consistent enough, or else they will eat you alive, right? Not only the players, but the coaches and especially the media and the fans, of course, would just destroy you. So within every success is buried, I think a poison pill is probably the right term, which is why consistency is so hard. Because to do that, a part of you has to be able to tune all of that out. Someone becomes successful for a reason, right? They did a certain action that was successful. And now the whole world is adjusting to try to stop them, right? Especially as an athlete, right? You said something really interesting when you were talking about in that tweet that you sent out. Yeah, you were talking about how you had this really hot run in your first month as a pro, but then the league adjusted. You said the league adjusted, of course, right? Because now we got film on this guy, we understand his approach, so now we're going to adjust the way he pitched. We'll be able to maintain that. You have to be able to be, instead of being attached to the story you just accomplished, I was such a good player, you have to be able to be constantly critiquing, constantly okay with failure, constantly working through your process, tuning every single thing out. And you're being interviewed every day, you're being asked every day. It's not that different than young kids. Just the noises are coming from the media, it's coming from mom and dad, it's coming from the constant conversation in the car, the constant narrative feedback. I remember a dad talking to me and saying he had 2 sons that were high-level soccer players, and he said, he goes, we pretty much don't talk about anything but soccer. Because every conversation in our world is around there playing soccer. I'm like, yeah, do you know what that feels like to a kid? On a subconscious level, it actually has a shadow in it. It feels really, really good to the ego. But what if I lose all of this?
Yeah, I remember vividly in spring training, guys picked up pretty quickly that I didn't want to talk about baseball outside of the field. And part of that is because that's all I talked about, right? Before I got there. And then once I got there and I started to experience that shadow that you're talking about, it became, I guess at that time, it was more of a subconscious, unconscious awareness of, oh man, what if this doesn't turn out the way everybody expects it to, myself included, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I was leading the Grapefruit League as a 20-year-old in hitting. I think I hit the first 2 home runs or whatever, and I'm sitting at a bar with a couple of prominent major leaguers having dinner, and they're like, see you up there on the screen? You're doing it, big dog, you're doing it. And I'm like, these are legit Major League Baseball players that are giving me this praise, right? And I'm just like, man, it feels so weird, right? On some level, it's like reaffirming this identity that we talk about, that I am great, that I am safe, and I am loved. But then this fear starts to creep in, or starts to rise up, right, from the unconscious. And my way of coping with that was to just shut it out. And again, part of it's you're talking to people in the media all the time, but you realize that you just get tired of talking about yourself, right? And trying to live up to everybody's expectations within those conversations as to why you've had the success that you've had.
Yeah.
And I think looking back on that, it's interesting because throughout my career, as I became more of a veteran player and more experienced and been through the trials and tribulations that I've talked about publicly, being able to share that perspective with young players is something that I really enjoyed. But now as I'm entering this space as a parent, right, and realizing how difficult it is for some parents who have all this information that they want to give to their kids.
Yeah.
And as we've hammered home the first 7 episodes, like you've got to give them the space, right? You got to create that safe feeling for them to be able to come to you and ask for feedback.
Yeah. If you do that, if you protect that for them, you let them wrestle with that themselves, and you're not constantly coming there, then they know they're safe. And then as they get older, again, that foundation is there, and that ability to be consistent will be so much easier for them. They can just let this stuff go. I've noticed that essentially my son, like when they got beat really bad, I mentioned in the last episode how they got beat really bad in this game recently, and I asked him how it was, and he was able to see it pretty clearly. It was weird. It didn't hurt him. Some of the kids were crying afterwards and stuff, but he was just like, yeah. And he goes, that's one game. But he said to me, I go, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I could tell the other team was better than we were. And then he said something about maybe we should have played defense differently and stuff. But he had this kind of just easy, it's not that big of a deal. And more and more, I'm starting to see him. He's focused on his game, being a good teammate, having some fun, focused on his game. It's starting to come in there because he's 10.5, which means, technically speaking, over the next year and a half or so, he should be exiting the developmental years and transitioning into adolescence. And I can see what I'm looking for is the warrior rising, the warrior that wants to go out there and has fun in the battle. Right? Because kids don't have fun in the battle. It's scary to be in the battle. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. I think I would literally give anything to be able to go back to your 20-year-old self and just go, hey, can I talk to you? And who knows if you would have been open to it. Your ego might have been so strong that you would have been like, yeah, I'm not open to. Yeah. But to be able to just sit with all those parts of you that were really struggling to feel safe at that space, and so all that talent is very, 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 very small percentage of what makes players able to achieve and able to accomplish and stay there at that.
Yeah, and I think that leads us into our next question. Why is confidence such a fragile?
Yeah, confidence is, I'll tell a story about a player I was working with. He's playing in Europe right now as a soccer player, and he was a Major League Soccer product. And when he first came to me, I was doing a little research just to kind of figure out who he was, because I hadn't watched him play much. And I found this interview, and he was this really highly touted rookie. Okay, he was coming off U23 World Cup. He'd scored a goal to beat France in the World Cup. I mean, it was a really big deal. And he was coming out of Indiana, and so he was really highly touted. And I went and saw this video where he'd been brought up and started to get a little playing time towards the end of the season. And the guy's asking him, well, it's got to feel good to get a little playing time, towards the end of the year. And, what do you, kind of standard, what do you need to do to get more? He's like, well, yeah, it's really good for my confidence, and it would really, and it's good to have confidence, I just see if I get more confidence, get more playing time, I get more confidence. And I remember asking him, saying, like, what is it you're looking for? And he goes, well, I just need confidence. I go, well, how are you going to get that? And he said, I need to play more. I said, and I just ran the cycle. I go, well, how do you get more playing time? He says, well, I need to train better. Okay. I said, well, what do we need to do to train better? And he goes, well, I need more confidence. I go, well, okay, how do you get more confidence? So we started doing after a while, he's like, I go, do you see the problem here? He goes, yeah. I go, confidence isn't real. And he goes, yeah. I go, it's kind of a silly word, right? Like this thing, it's not real. You're looking for a story that says you're good. Yeah. Confidence is this illusionary story and that's why we get there and we can dwell there for a little bit, Actually, just a mom of my son's soccer team the other day, it's like, yeah, we were watching our team, they're just getting smashed. And I said, yeah, it's nice to see them go up against some real competition because the week before they'd won 11-0. She's like, well, yeah, but that was really good for their confidence. I go, it wasn't. That was an illusion. She goes, yeah, you're right, it was. I'm like, yeah, it's an illusion. It's not real. And for the most part, confidence isn't. You can either play a game or you can't, right? And you can play it at a certain level. And if you're weak at it, strengthen it.
Yeah.
Improve these skills, execute these motions, execute them consistently, and you have success. But the mind, the egoic mind, is constantly navigating those questions deep in the subconscious. Am I safe? Am I valuable? How do I get that safety? How do I get that value? We do it through accomplishing a story, and it's safer to get the story than it is to stay here and try to, endure. I've likened high-level athletes, not just pros, even high-level kids. When kids are playing premier soccer at 11, 12, 13. I mean, I got a guy in the he's 15, he's playing in the U17 in the GA Cup right now. I've said, it's like living your life on the edge of a cliff. And we're asking these people, including young Travis Snyders, to get comfortable standing next to right on the edge of a 1,000-foot cliff, just saying, it's okay, you're not going to fall, which you're not. But how are you supposed to be comfortable in that space?
Yeah.
Right. And the ability to be consistent is learning to be able to be so safe within your body, so safe within your psyche, that you subconsciously, you feel so loved, so connected, so safe. You can stand on a 1,000-foot cliff and just be okay.
Yeah, I think there's the saying, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think that will probably resonate with a lot of parents listening to this, because that's a mindset, a quote that I hear thrown around in professional sports and high-level, business people that I've been around. And it's really not what it seems, right? And it's that false illusion of, well, I'm going to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, I'm going to be okay, but you don't even know why you're actually uncomfortable, right? And the conditions of playing minor league baseball versus major league baseball, this was a constant narrative for us, a mantra really, is like, nobody cares, right? The game doesn't care.
Yeah.
It's the same game, right? Your skill set's still the same. We can all use the excuses of, I didn't get enough playing time, or my position, I had a platoon. I didn't get to play every day. I didn't get to face lefties, right? So these were all the narratives that my ego was constructing to protect me from the real truth. You need to get better, right? And because of that emotional attachment to the story of, I'm great, I'm loved, I'm safe, right? I wasn't able to differentiate the two things, especially as I got triggered and more triggered throughout my career, and started to realize, oh, wow, I'm pointing the finger everywhere else but myself. And it's easy to my fault, but let's go deeper. Let's understand, what is that resistance below the surface that's causing the actions above the surface. We talked about in the fantasy versus the dream. What is stopping me from becoming the best version of myself? Not comparing myself to the other top prospects or comparing myself to the guy I'm competing with for my position, right? Because that's another thing I experience a lot, and I know kids go through it. There's a competition for positions, right? And you're constantly evaluating the person that you're competing against on your own team or the same position. What do I need to do to outshine this guy, right? Instead of, what do I need to do to be the best version of this? I think it's important for parents to understand that difference, because again, we put so much emphasis on achievement, right? That we create this narrative that if I just achieve, I'm... And I think that's where our world of youth sports has really gone, with the argument over participation trophies over, first, second, third place trophies. I think the thing we're missing there is, when we're talking about those developmental years, the winning and losing is really just detrimental, right, to the kids' development of identity and their foundation. Yeah. To then be able to really experience failure later on in life and say, I'm good. I'm still going to push forward with the things that I can take away from this after reflection and say, I need to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So what impact do parents have on that confidence and that consistency?
Well, because they are the foundations, they're the foundations of it all. If confidence is this story, let's just say it's just a story, okay, then it needs something solid to stand on. If it doesn't stand on something solid, then it's just something going to topple over. The second it takes a strong wind to just push it over, right? So the kid gets called up to that thing, or he gets this opportunity, or he goes to that experience, that summer camp, and then he gets this experience, and he just gets knocked down. Or you gave an example in one of the videos we were talking about of pitching, and I think you struck out the side. Yeah, and then the next inning, all of a sudden you were struggling with your control, and instead of being able to just take a deep breath, get back in your body, and just do a little work, locate the ball, start having a panic attack. Yeah. Right. And then so that's built off of a foundation. So your foundations weren't able to handle a couple balls where you're struggling to stay in control. So, in baseball, it's interesting when you talk about baseball compared to soccer, because of the lanes that you and I have kind of been raised in. Baseball, I think, is much, much harder than soccer in a lot of ways. I think it's the hardest game in the world. But because it's just it's so micro, right? But the idea is that we create the foundation, and then we can allow them to struggle and go through these things. And you will find that kids with a solid identity formation. They feel that profound sense, I am safe, I am loved no matter what. They'll naturally realign themselves. It doesn't take a lot of effort. We don't have to fix them. They'll fix themselves, right? Again, we can facilitate. Hey, what do you need? Like my son was like, I'd like to get a skill training. Well, I'm capable of teaching him all those. Right? I did it for 15 years privately, and I just like, well, no, I get you a guy to work with, and I'd drop him off and I'd walk away, get my car, drive away, come back in an hour, and then find that he's doing his own work. He's picking himself up, and then, the idea is to allow, I have this friend who played 14 years in the league, in the MLS. Okay? He's still playing, actually. He's in his 15th year right now. And I asked him, what's it take to have a great career? And what he said, and I mean, he's a little French here, but he said, you got to be able to eat shit for 3 years. Right? That was his exact quote. Be able to eat shit for 3 years. Meaning the skill of failing is very, very, very important. Well, how do you do that if your foundation if failure is like loss of love? That's death to a kid. It really is. It's a death to a kid. It's that big of a deal. And so, for most people, failure is not an option because it feels like death. It feels like death on a subconscious level.
Well, yeah, when we get back, we're looking forward to diving deeper into this with you guys.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like 3A Sports Journals. Many athletes don't journal because they simply don't know how it can be helpful to their process. Elite athletes around the world use journaling from an early age to help them face the tough challenges of sports. If your kids want to go from good to great, they need to learn how to journal. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.
So how do we teach our kids to look at failure productively?
Yeah, so that consistency can be, and it can be maintained and nurtured. Again, when we talk about those foundations, I tend to reinforce those foundations a lot. Right? There's a lot of that reinforcing of those foundations, and some of it is the way we talk to the kids about language. Like there's this thing I do with my kids, and especially my son. My daughter's just entering into the sports space. She's just starting tonight. Actually, is her very first volleyball practice for her volleyball team. It's going to be fascinating. But with my son, he'll do this thing, his ego wants the story, right? The ego is building the story. I'm good, because then I'm safe and then I'm loved. And he still wants that. He always wants that. He's aware. And so I reinforce the underlying need. I reinforce that as much as possible. Hey man, no matter what, you're okay. How are you feeling? Affirm what he's feeling emotionally. All right, you feel good? Okay, good. You want to talk about it? No, if he doesn't feel good, you want to talk about it? If he says no, okay, you're good. Just make that safety. One of the things that he'll constantly say, he'll talk, is that guy good? Who's good? Is this guy good? Is that guy good? I'm always telling him there's no good and bad. No good and bad. I just taken that off the table altogether. I said, there's trained and there's untrained. And he'll go, well, is that guy trained? I go, you're thinking about it the wrong way. So I said, there's good and bad is an illusion. I'm always telling them good and bad is an illusion. And they go, there's no. So what I've trained my son to understand very clearly that there's one good soccer player in the world. Right now, his name is Leo Messi, right? And then there's like a newborn baby somewhere, that's being born right now is the worst soccer player in the entire world, And I'm always telling him that. I've said that to him so many times that it's locked in his mind and no one's good. We're all just training. We're all just training. And I even drew it one time on a big whiteboard. I drew what a spectrum is. What's a spectrum? I said, well, here's what a spectrum is. I put Leo Messi on one side and I put a little newborn baby at the other side. And I said, everyone in the entire world is on this spectrum. Soccer player. So I go, where are you? And he kind of drew it. Oh yeah, you're about right there. I said, so what's your job? And he's like, try to get there. I'm like, right. That's it. Right. And to make and to affirm that I affirm. Hey, how you feeling today? Yeah. You feel like you gave everything you got. He goes, yeah. And just kind of work with that kind of thing, but it's just affirming you're okay. You're safe. You're okay. You're safe. What do you want? You're okay. You're safe. What do you want? When you nurture that as a parent, you are creating a platform and they can accomplish anything. And they will just take it and run. At some point, they'll go, I got this, Dad. And they'll go, great. Yeah, go. Here if you need me. And they will take off on their own. And that's the whole idea. I'm kind of winding him up for that process.
Yeah, I think back to my experiences, right? I've talked about being the best player on my teams all the way from 9 until I got to the big leagues, and get to a place where you start believing the narrative that you are good, right? Instead of understanding where I'm at on the spectrum. And having the goals of being a Hall of Famer or a multi-year All-Star or somebody who makes X amount of money playing or plays X amount of years, those started to become, right, my goal, my barometer for success. Instead of understanding to get to that end of the spectrum, there is a good 50-something steps that I got to take, even at the major league level, right? Areas of my game that I need to be focused on improving. And it's very easy once your kid starts to have success, right? And this is what we want to dive into next. How do you help your child who is having success? Maybe at a young age, let's start young and then we can shift to older. But at a young age, your child is maybe the hyper-competitive kid that we talked about earlier, right? How do we help the kids that are having success at a young age avoid that trap of flag planting or I am good and this is why I'm loved and why I'm safe?
Now, assuming that this, that hyper-competitive kid, assuming that I'm talking to parents right now who, there's been some damage done and my kid's in this space you're describing, where he's very dependent on that story and he's right there and he needs that narrative to feel good. Assuming that, first and foremost, we do our work, right? So that we're not projecting on them anymore and we begin to shift our own behaviors so that we're focused on the underlying needs. So if your kid's in that space, the underlying need for everything isn't, I'm good. It's, I'm safe and I'm loved. That's the underlying need. As they move forward into adolescence, if that trauma exists, because it is trauma, I know that's a kind of severe word, but that's what it is. Then that means they go forward with that underlying need still there to know I'm safe, I am loved, no matter what. I'm safe, I'm loved, no matter what. They need that. So it's our job to provide for that. Even when they're 15, 16, 17, and they're going, I'm so good, I'm so good. You're safe, you're loved, no matter what. And then if that's there, that foundation is there, then we start to shift our language and our conversations rather than in how do we make you better as a player, but how do we bring that awareness? The awareness I'm building in myself as a parent, how do I help you find that awareness too? And those can be conversations of, we maintaining those conversations like you find in Hero. It's really interesting. A lot of the exercises in Hero are designed to create vulnerable conversations between mom and dad, right? So those intentional conversations with kids in that space about saying, how do you feel when you're out there? Being able to, so we can get them to the point where they can open up about whether they're feeling anxiety, whether they're feeling a type of depression, whether they feel fear. How do you experience doubt? We want our kids to be able to, at those ages, to be able to feel safe enough to have those conversations. So again, it's about us doing our work to create that foundation that now maybe we've lost a little trust in those early years, but maybe we could develop that trust. Maybe as opposed to them always looking to you with that kind of fear, that sense they're going to lose love, they can start looking at you as that place I'm safe.
Yeah, and I see, and I've tweeted about this and seen mixed responses, but kids nowadays, right? The world we live in with social media and online recruiting and video recruiting, you constantly see kids posting their tournament stats or they won player of the tournament in the weekend that they just experienced. And how would you encourage parents to support their child who is going through that experience? Maybe they're 14, 15, 16, starting to think about playing college and the challenges that come with getting recruited versus being a number who's going to pay to go to a camp that's going to fund assistant coaches, non-paid job. How do you help parents, or how would you tell parents to help their kids navigate?
Know your role, do your work. Right? Know your role, do your work. As much as humanly possible, place the responsibility for that process in their hands and back up. And for older kids, when we're dealing with kids that are above 12, I would just tell them, be the lighthouse. Okay, your goal is to stand on the hill and shine. That's it. Lighthouses don't move. They don't go out there. Their job is to shine, to illuminate the rocks for the people, the ship captains out there steering their ships around. We think of our kids as those kids out in the boat, right? We don't go, the lighthouse doesn't say, scream at them, hey, turn your boat. And it certainly doesn't go out there and try to steer it for them. It just stands there and shines. And then they got to figure it out. And that's the job when we're kids above 12, when they've exited those developmental years and they're looking at those kind of spaces, your job is to stand there and shine. And what is it we're illuminating? We're illuminating sometimes the things they can't see, but mostly you're showing them the way home. So it's a little bit like a porch light kind of situation. Hey, as your kids head out into that world where they're going to experiment and they're trying to find their way, you just leave the porch light on for them so they know their way home. That's the idea, and I actually right now working with quite a few parents where they come to me because their kids are high level athletes, but they're kind of out of control and they don't know what to do with it. And all I'm doing is kind of reeling them in like a fisherman, just going, let's just pull back here, and let's turn the porch light on and let's let them. They're out there, they're doing their thing, they're steering their ships all over the place. But if we shine enough, they will see their way. But there's a trust required in this. We have to be able to let go. And that's the number one problem with parents, is that we struggle to release them. At these older ages, we struggle to just let them go, let them fail, let them struggle, let them do this thing. And be able to just say, hey, son, what do you need? Hey, my daughter, what do you need? What do you need? From me, what would be most helpful? Because we're also lost in our head and in our ways of trying to fix them. Change it, fix it, improve it, get it better. Ultimately, because we're trying to fix ourselves.
Yeah. And I think most parents would convince themselves, as I've been guilty of at times, where this is what my kid needs and I'm going to do it for them. Yeah. Instead of really understanding how you're preparing them to deal with life after sports, life after living in your house when they go to college, when they develop into, their mid-20s and now their brain's fully there. Yeah. It's like, what are the foundational pieces we as parents have modeled, right? Through the work that we've done and the presence that we've created and the space that we've held for our kids, and being that light. As you said, I love the lighthouse reference and the porch light, because again, for those kids that are out there looking for that love on social media, for those kids that are out there looking for that love in every weekend tournament, understanding our role as parents is not to go out there and fix everything for them, but just to be that consistent.
Yeah. Seriously, I had a kid, I think I mentioned in one of the other videos that there's a player I'm working with right now. He's a U17 academy player, highest level youth soccer in America. And he's playing in the GA Cup right now, which is the biggest youth tournament in the world. And they had a really tough loss yesterday. And I texted him and said, how you feeling? And he said, yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. But he was struggling with, his teammates were really struggling. He goes, because he could feel their parents crushing him. He said the parent pressure is really bad down, what he said. Like how, because so you can see all his teammates are really, really struggling. Now he's doing his work, and his mom, she's not doing the work. She's listening carefully to what I say and to what he's saying, and kind of learning to back up a little bit and just let him work through some stuff. And as she sees it's working, so I think she's trusting. But that's the thing. He's like, yeah. He goes, so now the question for me, when he goes, okay, so he said the parent pressure is really bad. Now I'm going to watch the next game. I'm really curious what's going to happen, because that's the kind of thing. You got a bunch of kids subconsciously scared. Right? Because the parents are trying to fix it all. They're going to come in there and they're going to offer you're going to hear a million voices telling them what's supposed to happen, plus all that subconscious stuff coming into play. So they can't just go out there and be in their bodies, put it on the field, see what happens,
How are we on time? We need 5 more minutes? Okay, we need to come up with 5 minutes of talk.
Well, let me do this. Let me ask you. I'm curious about you, okay? Because there's so many things you experienced that I can't personally, I get this stuff in my mind and at some level in my body, but I didn't live it like you did. If you could go back to 13-year-old Travis and you're watching him play, and you're watching some of his games, and he comes off and he's having a rough game, and you're watching how your parents say, what would you could parent that guy? What would you change about the way you were parenting?
I mean, my parents, and I've talked about this a little bit, they had their own personal struggles that I think created a lot of the trauma that later on in my life that I became more aware of and started to understand kind of what they went through and how that repeated itself as far as cycles go. For me as a 13-year-old kid, the instability that I had at home was a big factor in my desire to want to feel safe. And I've talked about this publicly, is baseball was always a safe space for me. So much was going on away from the field. But as I've had time to unpack that, right, that was a story that my ego had created for me to say, this is where I need to be for me to be safe and away from all the other things. Well, there's plenty of memories in my core memories of my parents being at the games and being supportive parents, right, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. But understanding how difficult it was for them in that time, not having the resources that we have now and what we're trying to provide for parents, to be able to manage the expectations of everybody around you. And I think for parents that are going through this, who have a child who's successful at a young stage or a young part of their developmental process, really being able to reaffirm that you are safe and you are loved. And it's got to be through your actions, right? Which my parents both struggled with addiction and other things that made life at home very inconsistent. And it got worse throughout my teenage years, which is, as we've talked about, an interesting thing, because so much of my success was during those teenage years. But I had just gotten so good at suppressing right, those things, that I became this pro on the field and knew how to, shouldn't say pro, because at 14, 15, there was still a lot of emotional outbursts, right? But being the parent who recognizes those emotional outbursts for what they are. And it came up in games where I remember a 13-year-old year, we went to the Cabo World Series, and this is down in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And this is our first national tournament in a new organization, with half of our group from Little League and half the group from another Little League. And we put together one of the best teams in the state. And we go down there, and we have a little bit of success early on. And then by the end of it, every time I'm striking out or getting out, I'm just blowing up the dugout, throwing helmets and bats. And I was really lucky that I had coaches and other parents on the team that kind of understood my situation and really rallied around me and created that sense of community to help kind of have some of those tough conversations. I remember the coach came up to me and was like, "Hey, man, you're the best player on this team. And if you go out there and you get out, and every time you get out, it's this massive outburst of emotions and you're blowing up the dugout, how do you think that affects the rest of the people?" Right? And that's a lot of pressure to put on a 13-year-old kid as I'm saying this out loud, right? The coach was doing the best he could to kind of bring awareness to this situation. But if I were my parents in that situation, it's finding a way to have the conversations or provide that space and that love unconditionally, so that I knew whether you got out or whether you got a hit, doesn't, right? And that's where you talk about being on the edge of a cliff. That's how I felt for most of my life, is I see this big scary thing over here that people are telling me not to worry about, but it felt like death, right? It felt like death when I didn't win the MVP of the tournament, or I wasn't the best player. And I feel like I was a pretty good teammate in a lot of ways, and picking my teammates up and showing up for them on a daily basis. But under the surface, I was struggling, right, with that identity of who I am and what makes me valuable. And I think parents listening to this, it's an easier thing said than done. But it would start by me having to do the work, right, as the parent, to work through my own stuff and give myself a basis of understanding of how to support my child, support my own children that I'm carrying with me, but then also support my child who's going through this experience. Neither of my parents played college sports or high-level sports in their youth sports experience, so they didn't have that foundation. I think that's what excites me the most about 3A, right? It's like we're trying to find as many parents out there as possible. I want every parent in Little League and youth soccer and every other youth sport to read this book just to get that foundation, right? And that's what we lay out there in the book, and that's why we have the Athlete's Journal as well, right? To teach kids how to go through this process, so that we don't have to operate from a place of fear of the unknown. Because not a lot of parents have played in the major leagues, right? Not a lot of parents played Division I or even Division III or junior college sports. So it's tough to have that expectation. But I think, again, it's our responsibility as parents to take that step, to lean into that fear or that resistance that we're feeling, right? If I'm good, I'm not doing too much damage here, and say, why can't I go from, if I'm a good parent, why can't I be a great parent? So wrapping this up, looking forward to our next episode where we dive into the ego and the narratives that our ego constructs to not only make us feel safe and loved, but to also reaffirm the things that we did not receive in our child.
That'd be a big one.
Looking forward to it.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like Hero, an interactive guidebook taking parents of young athletes on a journey through their own experiences and perspectives, and how to approach the balance between being a loving parent and encouraging your child to push through challenges and excel in their endeavors. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.